coming up in this episode.
You have to buy the glasses, you have to buy the headset, and then spend more money building solutions for those devices just to make use of them. Like, imagine if you had to buy a laptop today and then spend another 50 or 100,000 pounds building an Excel software just for you to use it. That's kind of what the industry is like right now. And what we're really doing is we're developing an AI assistant. It's a one-of-a-kind assistant called Cassie. And Cassie is what we call a spatial AI assistant.
The biggest mistake that was made in the early sort of social media platforms especially was that they were not transparent about what they were going to be using their data for. If they had been, it probably wouldn't have been as big an issue, because that's now caused a huge trust issue, broken trust with the general public, especially the general public that maybe isn't as tech literate as people like us, with that concept of giving out data. But then also, I think finding out that a lot of this data is being used by government bodies for various political reasons is hugely concerning.
Some investors just want safer bets and some want very risky bets. And if you're not aware of where you stand in that sort of spectrum, that you're not targeting the right investors potentially.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg McCallum. Raw, uncensored conversations with startup founders.
So yes, tell me, what have you been up to since we last caught up?
Oh, actually last week we were at AWE, which is the Augmented World Expo. It was held in Vienna, Austria this year. And so Phantom Tech was there, and we actually unveiled our partnership with Digilens. So it was really great.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to be asking you about that today, that's for sure. And I'm sure you want to tell me about it. That's awesome. And Vienna, I mean, a good excuse to go to Vienna, right?
Yeah. I've heard. We heard that they had some good beer. We tried it.
Yeah. Were the rumors right? Do they have good beer?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
you can confirm
that. Views, really good views. They have like quite a lot of high rises there as well, and you can kind of go up to the top, and there was some nice restaurants. You can see the entire city.
Oh wow,
really nice city. Yeah.
I've never been, but I've heard amazing things. So is that your first time that you've been?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it sounds wonderful. Well, look, thank you again so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. You being generous with your time, as everyone is on this show. It's quite a lot to ask, a couple of hours of your time when you've got so much to do. But I really do appreciate it, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I do. So look, before we get going and I'm start asking you some questions and find out a bit more about what's been going on with you and the business and things like that. The only sort of bit of structure in this entire shit show of a show, as I usually say, is at the beginning I like my guests just to introduce themselves and their business. You can take as long or as little time as you like to do that, and then I might start probing away, if that's okay. So, and while you're doing that, I'll probably share my screen for your website and things like that as well. So take it away.
Sure. So Phantom Technology is an AI startup located in Cambridge, UK. What we're really doing is we're actually developing the next generation of human interface technologies. And really the main driving factor is the fact that there is this sort of new era of what we call AI-powered wearables that's coming. And this is largely the result of the recent progress in AI. So the advent of large language models, generative AI, has sort of sparked this new category of devices, like wearable devices, that have AI as the core functionality and core feature for users. So a very critical example is smart glasses, like AR glasses. AR glasses have traditionally been very sort of like futuristic ideas, and you may have seen some prototypes, but it's not a consumer product yet. And there was a lot of it is hardware problems. But one of the reasons why smart glasses has not been adopted at mass is actually because it's hard to sort of figure out what is the use case of an AR glasses and how does that practically scale without solving a lot of challenges, a lot of technology problems. But AI and more maybe more accurately, generative AI actually is a great factor for increasing the adoption of wearable devices such as smart glasses and AR glasses, because generative AI in essence can provide infinite use case, right? Infinite value. So an example of generative AI is of course ChatGPT. Another example of generative AI is Midjourney and being able to synthesize images. But no one's really seen the power of generative AI in real-time augmented reality. And the reason why that's so exciting is because it can create all kinds of experiences. It can create all kinds of solutions without the need of building an application for each of those use cases. And that's really important for businesses who are currently spending hundreds of thousands of dollars building applications just to use an augmented reality glasses in their factory or in their, in let's say in the hospital. And that's one of the limiting factors for the adoption of AR, is the fact that you have to buy the glasses, you have to buy the headset, and then spend more money building solutions for those devices just to make use of them. Like, imagine if you had to buy a laptop today and then spend another 50 or 100,000 pounds building an Excel software just for you to use it. That's kind of what the industry is like right now. And what we're really doing is we're developing an AI assistant. It's a one-of-a-kind assistant called Cassie. And Cassie is what we call a spatial AI assistant. Now, what that means is Cassie can provide solutions that relate to your real-time environment. So, for example, you can ask Cassie, hey, Cassie, where did I leave my keys? And Cassie will say, oh, here's where I lost all your keys. And so what it's doing is actually, it's seeing everything in real time. It's observing the world. It's listening. It's also indexing things in 3D space. And so then you can query things about your environment or about your experiences that just happened while you're wearing the device. But that's one use case. Another example is that you can kind of just, let's say you go up to your fridge, open the fridge and say, hey, Cassie, help me cook something with these ingredients. And Cassie will go, all right, here's some of the dishes you can make. So we're sort of bringing the power of large language models and generative AI into wearable devices by combining it with what we call perception technology. So that's computer vision algorithms, that's real-time 3D mapping, and so on. So that's fundamentally what Cassie does, and we're embedding that into existing and new and upcoming smart glasses. And so our partnership that we unveiled last week was with DigiLens, who have this incredible platform called the Argo. The DigiLens Argo is a it's a all-in-one augmented reality glasses, and we've embedded Cassie in these headsets, and they're coming out early next year. So that was the announcement, and that was what we were showing off at AW.
It's amazing. I'm just going to share my screen now for DigiLens Argo so people can see what that is as well. Because these wearables have become a lot more compact, a lot less cumbersome. I mean, one of the biggest problems with these when they first sort of launched was just how disgusting they looked. Obviously, we got the Meta and who was it? What was the glasses company they partnered with?
Ray-Ban.
Ray-Ban, that's it. Their partnership, and you can see there's a desire to want to make these things a little bit more appealing, especially to sort of Gen Z and so on. But this obviously looks a little bit more industrial, I'd imagine. So that's their target market, I'd assume, right?
Yes.
That's amazing. So you're going to be partnered with it. So is this going to be coming out as standard with some of their future products, or is it something that will be like an add-on that they'll be able to provide with Cassie?
We are targeting it to become a default assistant. So Cassie will be default assistant for the Argo, and actually that's kind of what we're doing with Cassie across other hardware providers as well. We want Cassie to be so really our philosophy is that smart glasses should have value from day one. And what I mean by that is you should be able to turn on the smart glasses and you should be able to make use of it straight away. Cassie is in essence able to provide, out of the box value for anyone. So you can just, open it up, turn it on, use it for ordinary experiences. Let's say in this room, I could just say, oh, where are my keys or whatever. But you could also use it in industrial settings, which is kind of the more focused point of entry into the market, which is, in assembly line, you could kind of imagine that you've got various products or products with variations, and so that can become quite complex for the operator to assemble everything and to remember all the components. So what Cassie can do is sort of help you by just saying, hey, Cassie, help me build this product. Cassie can say, all right, well, here's all the components, here's where they are. So show you a path, the most efficient path to collect them across the factory and bring them back. And this example, again, it's not pre-programmed, because as you're walking around the factory, it's able to remember where everything is and then index them. And so when you ask, like, well, how can I build this product, it will remember where to find all of the components required to make that product. But similarly, you can imagine Cassie being an assistant for therapy, or an assistant for logistics, or an assistant for even in example, like one of the examples we're looking at, which is quite fun, is could Cassie be used as a extension of, let's say, your work life, so like a co-pilot, but for your environment, for your real-time environment. So Cassie could actually help you. Let's say you're doing something quite laborious, or you're trying to diagnose a problem. Cassie could help you do that. You can go, for example, you can go up to a boiler and say, Cassie, can you help me fix this boiler? I have no idea what's wrong with it. So it's able to quickly check up the model of that boiler, all of that, in less than 10 seconds, and provide actually a solution and say, try depressurizing it, because this one, and here's the valve, like turn this valve right here. Yeah. And this is where it gets exciting, when you bring the results back into augmented reality. It's like Jarvis, like we always say, is we're basically trying to build Jarvis from Iron Man. That's actually the intention behind it.
Which resonates the hell out of me, because that's what I've wanted for a very long time. I mean, I would absolutely want that kind of assistant. So I think on a day-to-day basis, the one that really resonated with me as an example as well was when you said about in the kitchen opening the fridge, right? Not so much for ideas for recipes, because I'm the cook at home, right? And I'm an ex-chef, so that's fine. I'm the problem with that. The thing that really bugs me is food waste. And actually having I was literally thinking about this yesterday. It must have been because I was knowing we were having this conversation. I don't know, but I was literally thinking about this yesterday, and I had to throw something away that I forgot that I'd made that was in the fridge. And I thought, how great would it be if there was just something watching my kitchen, watching me cook, and as soon as it saw me cook it, it went and put it into Tupperware. It went, well, I know you've cooked that today. Based on the ingredients you put in it, there was dairy, this, that, and the other. It's probably going to go off in about 5 days. I'll automatically remind you, like, by the way, you've got some leftovers. So when I open the fridge, I go, don't forget about those leftovers. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of shit that I want technology to be doing for me, to be useful, and save a shit ton of money. And you imagine that in an industrial kitchen setting as well. Like the use cases there are phenomenal, because having worked in those environments too, the food waste is just ridiculous. So
it's interesting. If you think about what AI is really good at, AI is really good at sort of bringing large scale knowledge and large scale data together very quickly. Like with the recent advent of large language models, you can basically query anything about anything, right? And the way we look at it is it's mediocre at everything.
right.
So you can
story of my life.
It's like a mediocre chef. It's a mediocre teacher. So when I say mediocre, what I really mean is that it's good. It's not great, but it's good at pretty much anything. Now, what's where we can kind of imagine this going forward is that you can, let's say you have a business, and your business is dealing with food waste, but you also have your own kitchen, let's say, and so you're kind of figuring out a channel to distribute the remains of your food. So that in that scenario, you can kind of fine tune Cassie by just speaking to Cassie and teaching Cassie about your business, teaching Cassie about your kitchen and the assembly of the whatever it might be. Cassie can kind of start becoming more focused and more aware of the specifics of
more of an expert on that specific topic. Yeah,
precisely. And we say the thing where we're like, Cassie is a think of Cassie as an intern on day one, but an expert on day two.
Right. Yeah, which is essentially what we're seeing with some specific models that are being trained on very, very specific tasks. They very quickly surpass their human counterparts once they're given a very stringent focus on a particular domain, right? And yeah, just going back to your example as well on like skilled labor, and unskilled labor as well. So when we're talking about factory work and assembly lines and all that sort of stuff, I mean, as you were explaining that, I was just thinking of the huge profit saving potential from not only the speed, but also about the training potential for new employees, which typically means someone else has to come off the assembly line in order to do the training. That they can take a substantial amount of time before getting to a certain speed. Whereas if, I suppose, someone has just put on a wearable, performed the task at a decent sort of speed and level of quality, it will remember that. Cassie will remember that, and then when someone else puts it on, it will just show them, this is what the best person in our business has done. You just need to replicate that. And I think that's astounding for the potential that can save businesses, especially when you then scale that up to potentially hundreds of people across hundreds of locations. The shaving off of those minutes or the seconds in that is worth an enormous amount of money.
Exactly. And you actually stole you just like literally took the words out of our mouths in that sense, because we've been looking at that exact scenario. There's a few companies that
there's a reason I'm a commercial advisor, man.
Yeah. there's a few companies that have actually said they've that there are basically there are skilled workers in their factory who've been doing that craft for many years, and there is a sort of a shortage of labor to replace the next to replace the current generation. And the training programs are not, it's quite tricky, and not everyone can do them. So really, how do you train the next generation of skilled workers to do certain things that are very, that takes years to master? And in essence, a lot of those things actually, you can actually, it is teachable, but it's a matter of like, how do you transfer the knowledge? Like, are you really gonna go old school? Because currently they do these sort of training programs a lot of times where you've got to watch videos. I mean, it's still quite new school in that sense, but also in the sense that the materials, like they're not necessarily contextual. Like, you have to sort of remember a little bit of everything and try and learn but how do you put it to practice is also how you learn sometimes. So I think where Cassie kind of comes into that example is you can put the lessons you've learned into practice with Cassie as the co-pilot, watching over your shoulder and assisting you, and being able to say, oh, don't forget that little thing over there, add this next, and you kind of forget in the middle of something. You're like, what was the next step? I can't remember. Cassie can provide that next step as well. So holding your hands and bringing confidence to interns or new workforce, that could be really powerful as well.
And like you just said as well, like it can learn. So presumably, if you like, let's stick with this example because I love it. Like if you were to do what we were just saying, and have someone perform the task with Cassie present to learn it, and then give that wearable, whatever it is, headset, whatever, over to a trainee, a new starter, and say, right, now follow Cassie's instructions. Presumably you could still begin that journey with that expert present, talking them through additional tips, and Cassie's going to be listening in and refining further, right? So it could be like, actually, if you do it that way, you can shave off a minute, this is a bit safer, and all of that narration, I suppose, that you would normally do in an actual shadowing kind of training scenario. Then Cassie's going to learn how to also shadow train on top of just show the basics. So that's a really interesting concept for refinement. I know VR is used somewhat in industrial settings now. I've seen it used in things like welding, for example, for where materials are expensive, mistakes are expensive and dangerous. So you wouldn't want to, the whole premise of that as a sort of go-to-market strategy is save time, de-risk, all that kind of thing, and save money. Do you see that there's the sort of the future of augmented reality as a whole, or XR as a whole, I should say, is a combination of these two technologies of like AR and VR, or do you think it's going to lean more towards AR in the future?
I think that's a really interesting topic altogether. There's so many terminologies. There's AR, there's VR, there's XR, there's mixed reality. Let me start with just some definitions, because I'm a bit of a nerd about this. So like one way of thinking about it is actually this continuum that was created by Milgram et al. which is that on one end of the spectrum or continuum, you've got the real world, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the virtual world. And then you can imagine it as sort of a continuum, because as you're progressing towards the virtual world, you're adding some augmentations to the existing real world. So that's augmented reality, right? And as you get closer to the virtual world, so you have more virtual experience and less of the real worlds there, we call that augmented virtuality. So you can figure it as like a reverse of AR, but coming from the other direction. And then everything in between the real world and the virtual world is just mixed reality. Now this is where it gets interesting. So that's typically what was like an academic definition of those things. But in recent years, XR is sort of this umbrella term to define both VR and AR. But VR and AR are very different in essence, right? That one of them is VR is all about sort of simulating a synthetic experience of a virtual world, and it's done by blocking the real world and replacing it with the synthetic one, and it tries to simulate, you know, the experience of movement, the experience of, you know, 3D and all of that. Augmented reality is the superimpose. Well, it traditionally is about adding virtual content into the real world. But here's the thing, right? Spatial computing as a whole is just this new paradigm shift in computing. So all of those things, whether it's AR, VR, XR, MR, all of those things are a new kind of interface for computing. It's the spatial computing. Whether you've got a content on your table, let's say a virtual object on your table, or you're in a completely immersed VR world, they're all just spatial computing, because that's fundamentally the sort of transition we have in the interface technologies. Now, I think this is the kind of bet that we're making, is that we believe AR is not a visual medium. And this is a bit of a contrarian view, right? AR has traditionally been viewed as a visual medium, as a medium where it's all about how you see the world, where you add virtual things in the environment. The way we view augmented reality is that it's a medium for the mind. So what I mean by that is it's able to provide information in real time about your environment. It's able to help you in that example, right? Help you achieve a certain task. So when you really frame AR in that sort of practical way, you can kind of say, well, AR is more of it's actually an interface, right? But it's able to improve your cognitive capabilities, because it can provide, basically, if you combine that with AI, if you combine that with the internet, if you combine that with all these different existing technologies, AR is an interface that can enhance your cognitive capabilities in the real world. Whereas VR is about simulating anything and being able to put yourself in any world and any experience. So there is a difference there. But I think with VR, the advantage is that you can kind of, you know, again, you can simulate something that could be dangerous, that requires maybe, that could be expensive, that requires training beforehand.
You can allow for mistakes.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're in the production line, you probably want a smart glasses to just have there and be able to assist you and just enhance your workflow. And it's not just about training as well. When you're actually doing something over and over again, I think that's an example where AR can be very useful, because it can navigate from, you know, dynamically navigate from one place to another. Because in an assembly line, things are moving, and sometimes even like objects can move from one place to another in a factory, and keeping track of that can be quite cumbersome. So if there's people, you know, multiple people wearing AR glasses, and everyone has a view on that factory, you can imagine the factory being updated in real time from many sources at the same time. So each person is like viewing a portion of the factory and updating this like digital representation of the factory, or a digital twin. And so so someone else could have viewed a screwdriver move from one place to another, but you have access to that update. So you when you ask where's a screwdriver, it knows where it was last seen from someone else's viewpoint. So you can kind of imagine that chassis is a shared conscious. In those examples, you know, AR is it's an extension of your mind, really.
See, I'm both equally excited, but also slightly concerned about that vision of the future, in a sense, because like I said, like even my example of just having, say, a camera in the kitchen that was watching everything I was doing, tracking it, not even necessarily a wearable, but having that sort of technology, either in a wearable or just viewing, like you said, to create a digital twin with the sort of spatial awareness and understanding of visually the things that I'm doing and so on. You scale that up to then an industrial situation as well. Even that has, I can see those who are already concerned about the surveillance sort of state that we live in becoming terrified by that notion. And anyone listening to this right now or watching this right now who already has that inclination would be terrified by that concept of, say, hundreds or thousands of workers all essentially being surveilled by an artificial intelligence for whatever reason, because of that is begging to be misused in certain scenarios, right? Now, obviously, CCTV being part of the current surveillance state sort of solution, we understand it's for safety. It's for being able to monitor people and provide oversight and what's the other word I'm looking for? And a certain level of accountability, right? So if someone commits crime, we can play it back and we say, look, see, we understand that, but we also understand that in certain countries it can be misused. Do you think that we're sort of entering into a potential moral crossroads when it comes to this sort of thing? And if so, how do we prevent it from being misused?
I do think so, yeah. And I think it's really important that we actually try and carve the path that we want, because it's very easy for this kind of technology to be misused, but also the way you design a technology from the very beginning needs to sort of consider these things, because if you don't, then it can kind of get to a place where it's a bit too late. Because if there's an existing adoption and it's growing, and it's, let's say it's got a certain kind of technology in use that has maybe it's not really centered around privacy, or maybe it doesn't consider how to manage data properly, then if it's growing as in terms of adoption, and it will grow in adoption if it's useful, like all technology, then it might be too late to change that or do that, or to have the impact you want to have in the right way. So I think the important part is designing technology from the very beginning with that in mind, with those kinds of challenges in mind, and addressing them from the very beginning. So, for example, I'll give you a very simple one, which is quite well known in the industry. Like, if you've got an AR glasses, and it's got cameras facing, the world and sees everything in real time, the most important thing is that you don't want the system to record images of the environment and to share that on cloud. Like, you just don't want that. You don't want to be wearing your glasses in your kitchen, cooking, and then even if it's, let's say, quote unquote secure, but even if it's secure, but and it's on the cloud, whichever company owns that server or can see that data, that's still is a violation.
It's still vulnerable. People will access it if they really want it, right? Yeah.
So right there, it's an important design decision to make, to say that the images, the raw images and videos and sound never leave the device and go cloud. They stay on device. In fact, what we're trying to do actually is we're working with some companies that develop the architecture, right? That have built the hardware, and companies that build this system on a chip. We are trying to advocate for the chip designers to actually consider creating a separate system or separate chip that handles the images, the raw images, and then that never leaves that chip, so that it's even less at risk of being either stolen or of the data being leaked. So that you can kind of go lower and lower level and try and mitigate that risk as much as possible. And I think that's where it starts. You've got to start there. So you think of it this way: if you treat smart glasses as the beginning of what we call the big merge, right? Merging with the computer, right? Merging with systems. And if you sort of play that out in the future, you can imagine from smart glasses going into some kind of brain-computer interface technology where you have a chip that's maybe sitting on the outside of your skin and it's kind of reading some of your brain patterns and eye tracking and all of that. and these technologies exist and they're coming.
Mm.
And they will become part of the interface of how we interact with a computer. From now, it's important to design. I think really important to design these kinds of devices that kind of that protect the user's personal, but also biometric or cognitive even information locally, and only really you're only sharing knowledge-based or query-based data that you can retrieve from, let's say, a large language model in that scenario, or be able to access some kind of real-time information about the world. You need to preserve that locally, and I think that's one of the most important things to address.
I mean, I agree with you, but unfortunately, I think that you and I both know that that's a very idealized version of the way things will go down. Like, if we, like you said, if we look to that future of AR glasses and wearables being the sort of the first generation, and that they are going to get more advanced, like because by that very definition, more and more companies are going to be able to access the technology and create their own versions of these as it gets cheaper and more readily available. And there are going to be bad actors that are going to want to get in on the action, right? You can imagine some. I'm not going to name any names of any countries, but I mean, I think we all know which one I'm talking about. But one that's very prolific for its industrial sort of side of things, but runs a pretty harsh regime. I'll just say it's fucking China. I don't know why I was pussyfooting that around, like as if I care. I've never cared on this show. Anyway, but you can just imagine Chinese companies maybe taking a version of this technology and replicating a version of this OS and this AI, for example, and putting it to bad use. And I don't think it even needs to go necessarily as far as China to get there. I mean, if we just stay with where we are right now and your technology, for example, and look, by the way, I'm just exploring here. This isn't to try and poo-poo your technology. I think it's fucking amazing. But like, even if we would just stay where we are on the technology as it is, presumably, let's say the owners and the managers and the shareholders of a company who are going to adopt this technology would say, yeah, we love it, but we're going to want to see a dashboard, right? We're going to want to see some overview information of the overall sort of net speed of people on the floor, performance metrics and this, that, and the other. Now, of course, that will be used to make some determining factors, let's say when it comes to layoffs, right? And say the company goes through a hard time, well, then it's just like, okay, Cassie or whatever AI is running the show at the time, tell me who are the 100 people I should be laying off based on performance. You know what I mean? Like even that, and now that isn't necessarily nefarious, that's just business, but I think it's easy to see how that can then jump like very easily, because of like they're going to require that data. And I think it's not an unreasonable thing to ask, a company like yours and others moving forward to have that sort of data. Like that's the point of it, right? Make business more efficient. But you can see, I think, how that can then get in the hands of some sort of company in China that's maybe not got the best interests at heart of its employees, like how that can be misused, right? And that's the concern, because it will be. Let's face it will be.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think AI is one part of that discussion, but I also think just data, just straight up data, is another part of that discussion.
Right.
Because in that example with what you just shared with the dashboard and sort of analytics, let's say, you can do that right now. You don't need smart glasses for that. You can kind of do that how much time someone spends on the PC or a computer or whatever.
Exactly, and those tools already exist in software and things like that to a degree to help make these decisions already. Yeah,
and it really comes down to company policies. It comes down to perhaps regulation and other things like that. I think the part that's scary is the AI aspect of it, because again, you can do those things, but the part that AI comes into the picture and becomes a bit scary is where AI is able to make its own interpretations, perhaps persuade others to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do.
Right.
So in that example, rather than the dashboard, what if the AI sort of started gossiping, gossiping about someone not performing well to the manager or something, and then I think that's a bit more of a because in that scenario the human agency is lost, right? We want to maintain the human agency in all of this. So how do you provide value but also ensure that there's no loss of human agency? It's really hard, right? That's not an easy topic, because some can argue that right now even we've kind of lost some human agency with things like social media. and how we're influenced by technology that we use. Right now, if I Google something and I'm trying to find out something, and if if it's higher in the ranking of the results, I'm already kind of persuaded by Google's results to check out that article or this article or whatever. And there's a lot of influence there. And you got to figure out who is controlling that piece of technology that is curating results. And if it's not just, it might not be a company, it might be AI, that it could even be an open source AI doing that. It's still a little risky, because you got to, figure out how do you avoid it persuading others doing certain things that removes the human element from the equation of decision making, and even worse, over time erodes agency for human beings if it scales up and it starts making its own decisions and influences. I think that's scary, but
it will always be driven by human agenda to a degree, right? So, like that example in China, for example, if the Chinese Communist Party were to say, look, no AI can be out there unless it's continuously keeping an eye on anyone that says anything anti-government. That wouldn't be a surprise, because of that is currently the state of technology in China as a whole, right? And I'm using China as just one example. There are obviously many, but that's I think more concerning for me when it comes to AI and technology as a whole, as we look right now and look ahead, is the human bias that we put on top of it, which is we had that AI conference recently. I was yesterday, wasn't it, actually? Which me saying that will probably age this podcast badly, because spoiler alert, we record these really well in advance, so people are going to figure out now when this was recorded. But and I haven't actually caught up on any of the keynotes or anything from that, but obviously that's a big concern, is human bias on it. But it's interesting, man. It's super interesting. But to go back to because I don't want to sort of dwell too much on the potential negatives of the solution you built, because I don't want to take away from the amazing achievements it is.
I think it's important to discuss those, though. I think they're really important, and it's not just potential negatives. It's also whenever you create a new kind of technology, of course, there's good and bad, and then the use of that could be either or both. But what's really important is how you design it to maximize the potential for good, right? Like to maximize the utility of it, or the use of good, and minimize the risk, or minimize the use of bad. You can't perfect that equation, but you can maximize it in some way that favors the good uses. But I was just going to say, I think there is another thing here, which is you and I are happy to sort of, I don't know about you, right? But most people are happy to give up on a lot of things, like even their personal data right now, for incredible utility, right?
I am all for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like Google is a great example of that, where, again, I'm just using the same example, but you're happy to, you're happy to say, all right, whatever, just take my search results, I don't care, do that, fine, but give me great search results, right? Give me really good, the best,
provide value. That's the exchange.
That's the exchange. And similarly with ChatGPT, and it's free, right? And that you got to really question, why is it free? That's why it's free. There is an exchange here. And similarly with ChatGPT, it's another example of that, where you're saying, well, it's a little bit different, actually, because it can. And my hope is that we actually go a little bit backwards, in the sense that we do go back to the age of subscribing and buying software, because we've become so used to free software that we don't realize how we're paying for it. And I think the world is catching up to the realization of, we've been paying for it all along, just not the way we thought we were. But I hope that we go back to the way of, maybe this is a bit of idealism, but maybe one day we can kind of go back to the age of actually paying for software. And if not, then having a more honest and transparent exchange. That's kind of what I believe is happening now. With the example of Google, again, going back to that example, you're happy to give up on a little bit of something to get a lot of something back. I think with AR and smart glasses, it's the same thing. If the utility is like 10 times better than Google, right, or 10 times better than the next best thing, you're happy to give up on a little bit of something to get all of that. Now, not saying that you should give up personal information, nor should you give up sensitive information or things you just don't want to give. You should have, of course, agency again. But there is an argument to be made that when the technology is incredibly useful, you're happy to give up a little bit of something to get the utility of that technology if it provides enormous value.
No, I agree 100%. And I'm actually probably on a bit of an extreme when it comes to that. Whereas in the sense that having grown up and been a huge fan of science fiction, like I think most of us are in this sort of space, because we're trying to make it a reality. I remember watching films where, you'd see characters getting up, walking around their house naked, going to the toilet, going to the bathroom, going to the toilet, brushing their teeth. And all the while there's an AI, evaluating the skin and muscle tone and, analyzing the pee in the toilet and just giving out a bunch of tips like, you need to take this vitamin today. There's the vitamin, like this, that, and the other. I love that. I don't need the privacy in my own home. I think the concern is when, that, like you said, that information can be potentially misused, and it's then being shared and then across the cloud or other networks that could mean it puts you at risk, you or your family or your loved ones at risk. That's the concern. I am happy. I don't care. Have my own personal data if it provides value and a better experience for me. Absolutely. I don't even mind the ads to a degree, because actually, if I give, because if that is primarily the reason why these platforms are free, to your point earlier, is because that's what they're trading in as our data for advertising. I actually don't mind that, as long as, again, the ads are relevant, because if I'm happy to be advertised to, and actually I prefer to be advertised to in a way that is more relevant to my likes and dislikes. You know what I mean? Like, that's actually better for me, because occasionally I'll see an ad when it's well optimized and I go, actually, that is something that I would like. Well done. I don't mind that at all.
Just don't go behind my back and sell my data to someone I don't want. That's
right.
That's kind of come in and say, look, what are you doing with my data? Is it really just for ads, right? Or is it really just to refine your algorithm so you can have better targeting for ads, or is there something else going on? I think the problem is we don't know what happens, and I think that lack of transparency is where people kind of go, well, if I don't actually know what's happening, then I'd rather just not share my data. And some platforms are offering alternatives. But yeah, you're right in the sense that a lot of people are happy to get the utility of that exchange.
I think that, you're right. You've hit the nail on the head there. I think the biggest mistake that was made in the early sort of social media platforms especially was that they were not transparent about what they were going to be using their data for. If they had been, it probably wouldn't have been as big an issue, because that's now caused a huge trust issue, broken trust with the general public, especially the general public that maybe isn't as tech literate as people like us, with that concept of giving out data. But then also, I think finding out that a lot of this data is being used by government bodies for various political reasons is hugely concerning.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like and subscribe with notifications turned on.
And again, like, okay, if you agree to third-party use, well, you wouldn't assume that third party includes government, but of course that's still a third party, man. Like, you should have known. But again, it's about being clear on that. And maybe it's, when these organizations started, they had no idea that it would get to that point. And that's a valid thing to say too, right?
Well, from a technology standpoint, I think we're exploring how this could actually, like, some of the ways that you can kind of mitigate that longer term.
Right.
So one example is, we're talking earlier about like the cutoff point of cloud-based, information share. So like you have, let's say, all the technology that currently, I'll give an example. Currently with Cassie, everything that is perceiving in its environment. So like it's able to hear you speak, it's able to see the environment, detect things. All of that is happening on device. All of that. Then the only aspect of that bit that is being shared to the cloud is when you ask a question that requires knowledge-based response. So what I mean by that is quite like, for example, I'm wearing the device and I go, which shop can I grab a, where is the nearest grocery shop that's open right now? In that very moment, it's not, the only thing that's being shared is that general question with my context, and the context could represent, all right, my location. And kind of similar how with mobile phones work, really, but all the information about your surrounding, the really sensitive bit of information, isn't really going anywhere outside of the device. But just playing that forward, what we're sort of kind of looking at long term is, can we have the knowledge part as well to some extent be local? Because one of the things with large language models, which is really exciting, is that in essence they're a compression of the internet. So the largest of the largest large language models are like trained. They're the enormous models trained on pretty much the corpus of the internet, right? Everything from image, text, etc. And what they do is they essentially represent the entire human knowledge in a, let's say, n number of gigabytes, but a file ultimately. And in essence, that's a compression of human knowledge. So can we compress that further so it sits on a, let's say, a 50 gigabyte storage device, like, on a glasses? If so, you can imagine a future where actually even the knowledge-based stuff is sitting locally. And so the cloud aspect becomes more about connection of real-time information rather than the knowledge part as well.
More of like the cloud aspect then becomes more of a library to keep updated on information, to reach out to as and when needed and pull stuff in, as opposed to a place where it lives. I mean, that essentially transforms then the AI to a very, very personal AI, and essentially a technological extension of the human brain. What you're doing is you're saying we're adding 5 megabytes additional storage to that human being in a very, I mean, that's very much moving into the realm of becoming an augmented human being at that point, because that is, if it stays local, then that's what that becomes essentially.
Yeah. Can you imagine a future where you land on Mars and you need to build a base, and we all need superhuman knowledge to do that? And you can't connect, to the internet of the maybe you can for like certain information or real-time communication, but you want to have all of that, even if it's like a laptop that you carry with you that is connected to or something like that, where it represents the world's knowledge in your fingertips. That would be ideal. But you're absolutely right. I think the way we're viewing it is that this is the beginning of that human augmentation stuff, where from now smart wearable devices right now, actually, even we can say that smartphones are in essence making us a bit of a cyborg, like me having the access to search anything, anytime, anywhere.
Well, there was a famous futurist, wasn't there? I can't remember his name now, who said we entered the age of the cyborg already, as a result of the dawn of the smartphone. That's our first entry point into that.
Precisely, yeah. And smart glasses just bring that closer to our brains, really bring that closer to our use cases as well, because it's that's what kind of what I mean by AR is the interface for that, right? Because it's bringing the AI, the component, the internet, all of those things closer to you, and it's making it easier for you to access that information. And it's the bandwidth problem, right? So like right now, if I want to access information, I got to open Google, use my thumbs to type something in, press search, and then maybe I have to add more context about the certain problem I have. With ChatGPT, it's getting a little bit easier. I just ask a question, and then but the problem with ChatGPT is that it doesn't have awareness of my physical context. So that's the next stage, right? So that's what we're doing, Cassie, is providing physical context into that query. And so now you can just ask a very quick question, and you don't have to explain your context. So yeah, it's the bandwidth problem that is, I think, that you can get using AI to improve that. And AI kind of takes more implicit input and uses that to infer your context or infer your intention behind the question. And that's kind of the technology that's going to improve the speed at which you can acquire information with smart glasses versus, let's say, a smartphone. But yeah, it is the age of cyborg. We've done it.
Which is hugely exciting, at least for me. I know some people find that sort of stuff terrifying, but I find that really exciting. And there's the interface problem as well, which is, like you said, there's, which is to your point about the speed I've heard talked about a lot, which is, essentially the fact that the human brain works at a certain speed that our body can't keep up with, essentially, right? Because of the barrier between a brain through a fleshy suit to then the technology that then again behind like you said, an interface or a piece of technology. So there's a lot of barriers between us and the information, and it's about trying to thin those down, I guess, isn't it, or eradicate them as much as possible. What do you make of some of the technologies around sort of brain interface technologies? I mean, obviously there's the what's the one that Elon's working on? Oh, what's it called?
Neuralink.
Neuralink. But there's even ones in the market now. I actually had one a little while ago. I've since sold it because I wanted to just play around with it, which was like a little device that sits on the back of your head and allows you to move things around in a simulated environment. You know, mostly for gaming. I think that was the idea. It was a dev kit for that I played around for a bit. It was really cool. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that? And maybe the applications in AR. Are there any applications there, do you think?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So going back to the point of bandwidth, I think this is kind of where it comes in. So if you go back, let's say, just go back maybe 30, 40, 50 years, the personal computer revolution happened, right, in the 70s, 80s. And the form of input for PCs was really keyboard and mouse. Like ultimately, that became the standard, like a pointer and a keyboard. Now, if you measured that input technology on a graph, which is precision, you would say, okay, a keyboard has very high precision because I can literally click on each key very accurately, right? So I click on letters, letter by letter, and then every click is very intentional, right? When I move the mouse, I am very intentional about where I position it on the screen. So it's very high precision, right? Then you move forward into the next revolution. Let's say you've got smartphones, so touchscreen. Now touchscreen is sort of bringing the existing ideas forward into a virtualized version. So a keyboard, but on screen. But a keyboard on screen is a little less precise because my thumbs are too fat to click on each key. So now the precision is lower, but there is something to counter that, which is prediction. So now where it gets interesting is the reason why actually touchscreen keyboards work, actually, the reason why they even exist and why we've adopted them is because of prediction algorithms where you type and it corrects you. And it does that a lot more often than we realize. So a lot of the time when we're clicking, it's already able to sort of predict what key you're trying to click on next because you're clicking on 3 keys at the same time. And it knows, okay, you're most likely clicking on K or whatever, right? So precision goes down a little bit, but prediction goes up to sort of counter that effect. Then you step into the next, where we're coming at now, which is spatial computing. I actually argue that spatial computing has even lower precision. In this example, let's say I'm using my voice. I'm speaking to Cassie. That's a lower precision than me intentionally moving a mouse or typing a letter or whatever, because now there's all this other context to consider, because the interface of computer is my world, is my room, right? So if I'm talking about something to do with this environment in the corner of my room, that is a layer of interpretation required for the system to know what even what am I talking about? What am I pointing at? So now you've got even lower precision when I ask a question, but you have even higher prediction, which is in the form of AI. And so AI is that next step after the keyboard prediction technology that we've had. But as we move beyond that, so after this revolution, I think that's where brain-computer interface technologies come in, because that's even less precise, because now it's reading brain signals only and not necessarily having to talk for some of those inputs, but it's able to just use your brain signals and try and infer what you're even, what could you possibly be thinking?
What the intentions were,
what the intentions are. So then even more prediction is required. So, but it seems there's a pattern, which is computers are becoming better and better and better at guessing what our intentions are over time. That's kind of the inspiration of the human and the machine.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I'd not thought about that before, because I saw a video recently of I believe it was a woman who was paralyzed who was speaking through an AI avatar recently, which just blew me away. I didn't take the time to look into it any further, who was behind it or anything like that. I didn't have the time, but I came across it and it really blew me away as a great example of how, and I think a lot of people in these sort of conversations forget about the applications of these things beyond just sort of themselves or day to day. There's an enormous amount of people in the world for which these sort of technologies will do more than just make businesses money or make our lives more convenient. It would be absolutely life-changing, like the contact lenses that were recently unveiled to help with restore vision and things like this. It's like these technologies yeah, okay, super soldiers might use them to go and invade, aliens in Mars, but more grounded, and in reality right now it's going to help tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Those are the wins I think that we need to be focused on, right? And and brain interfaces I think are a very clear win for so many people with huge issues when it comes to, and not to mention as well, it'll be interesting to see how the reverse of that interaction unveils too, right? In terms of what technology can input into a human brain.
That's an interesting one. I don't know much about that.
Even thinking about that from a medical perspective, helping people with maybe mental health issues,
right?
People who are maybe more inclined, let's just go on a very basic level, like someone's, let's say, with bipolar disorder, someone who may be very inclined to on occasion start getting negative thoughts creep in, having a piece of technology to maybe keep that person on track. I don't know how that would work because that's not my realm, but that's interesting too, that we can get to a different state. Obviously it throws up a whole bunch of other potential issues, but it's still fascinating and has great use cases.
My guess is that that's very that's quite far away, and we might start seeing that in a clinical format, but that I would imagine that kind of technology where it will be able to write to the brain would be quite far off. But
we've already got some elements of that. I mean, if you think about the idea of a pacemaker, I mean, it is kind of that, right? I do know that there have been some brain implants that administer like electric impulses and certain stimulations for certain disorders. I can't tell you what they are, but for certain things that require that to avoid seizures and things like that. Like, so I guess that we're, there's some, I mean, it's more base level, not going through the realm of AI, but you can see how it's not that far removed.
No,
really, from,
right. I think that I remember asking quite a few people, would you ever get a chip implant? And actually, what I found is that most people that I've spoken to say, no, I would never get a chip implant. But when I phrase the question, would you get it if you had a certain, let's say, disability, whether it's cognitive or else, and it could help cure or mitigate those, maybe the issues or something, and they usually say, yeah, maybe. In that scenario, maybe. Right. I think there's something there, right? If it could be a mental prosthetics in some sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that's interesting because I would argue that we're already, we already have a disability, all of us collectively, in comparison to the technology we created, in that we are behind, right? So actually, like a great example of that, going back to the very beginning of what you were saying about the use case for Cassie and the product overall, is memory. Human memory is absolutely awful. It is one of our biggest weaknesses as a brain. It's not that great. It's very, very easy to, well, it's just bad. And so one of the, essentially what you're describing when you describe Cassie is just an extension to memory capacity to a degree, right? Because of that's what it's able to do, and bring up things that you saw and forgot, or didn't even pay attention to. And so that, in of itself is, I would say, an existing fault in the way that we have been, put on this planet, however you believe that might have occurred. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's an existing fault in our development. Like, it's an existing bug. Yeah. Well, some people say it's a feature, not a bug, but I say it's a bug.
I honestly, I think human beings are really, the thing that they've always done really well is they're great tool makers, and like, we have to remember these are at the end of the day just tools for us. So
right.
Yeah, our tools have evolved significantly, and they're a form of artificial intelligence, but they're just still tools. So
right,
it's an extension of us, not the other way around. And but I think it's easy to see it the other way around. It's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, AI is maybe the super intelligence that we serve, and I think that's not a good way of framing it, because it can be it's kind of a slippery slope in that sense, if you think about it, because then you start thinking, okay, what are we, what is the human limitation, and you kind of see it as as a problem, like you said, like a bug in some instances. You may see it as a feature or a bug, but some people will see that as a bug and think of AI as the perfect version of us. And I think that could be
that's a slippery slope. Yeah.
It could be. I think even now, you've got a lot of pessimism in the world about AI, but there's also a lot of optimism. But there's also a divide in the optimism where some people are optimistic because they just think it's going to make us less bad, and then there are those who think that AI is just going to bring abundance and opportunity. I obviously believe in the second, in the latter, but I just don't want to think about it as us being limited necessarily, because like, what does that even mean? Like, this is a tool that we've created. So if we can create this tool, then we're not limited.
And it's just like any other tool, right? In one person's hands, it can be used to create; in another person's hands, it can be used to destroy. It's just that's just the nature of things.
It's like we can't measure the force of our hand against a hammer and say, oh, we're just limited. A hammer is more advanced. Like, no, a hammer is our creation, and a hammer does things that we can't do. But with our mind, we're forming our ideas into material. Like, we're very good at bringing ideas into a material existence. That's ultimately what human beings are really good at. Actually, animals are pretty good at that too, but in different ways. Like, birds can build nests, spiders can build these amazing webs. Human beings can create tools, and those tools can be, primitive like a hammer, but it could also be very advanced like AI. But tools.
I think what's really interesting about the AI discussion in this context as well, that people tend to forget, is that because people always use, usually the example of a hammer or a weapon, a sword, a gun, or whatever, when having these conversations. And I think the biggest differentiator, though, between those examples as the tools we've created up till now with AI, is that a hammer can't talk to another hammer.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind when it comes to your position as to either whether or not you're an optimist or a pessimist on the future. And actually, for me, that's why I fall on the more optimistic side of things, because I think if all hammers could talk with each other, they would probably decide that hammers should only be used for good, because they could see that overall the outcome of that is better for them. Yeah. Right. Because if everyone was to decide to use hammers for bad, what would happen? They would ban hammers. So generally, for the hammers to thrive and to proliferate, well, they'll go, do you know what? We should prevent people from using us for bad things. So I think that that's a massive oversimplification of quite a complex potential, future that we're facing with AI. But I think it's just, if we really were to play that out into its sort of, into the future, into its finite sort of the way things could go with in terms of AI. If you were to really think about AIs being created all around the world for different reasons, well, I mean, that's likely going to be, in my view, where we would probably end up. I don't know. There might be an AI system.
AI-powered hammers taking out the human race.
there's a blockbuster movie in there somewhere, man. Like, yeah, there you go. If this business doesn't work out, that's what you can do. Go into script writing, and that's the first one. And right now, in the state of Hollywood, they would probably lap that shit up. So go for it. But listen, I want to know a bit more about you, like a bit more, and I think people listening to this do, because obviously you're incredibly intelligent and interesting human being, created something really exciting here. But what led to this? Sort of take us back a bit, sort of into what's first sparked the interest in overall into these mixed reality sort of solutions?
I think for me personally, so my background is in games technology.
Right.
I was doing that at university and undergrad, and Pokemon Go was just around the corner. I remember that this was sort of announced and it was coming out, and there was a sort of a.
That feels like just yesterday.
It does.
Well. Like, but that's probably got to be like 7 years ago now, 8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So Pokemon Go was just coming out, and there was a real excitement again about what AR could do, and people's interest in AR was going up again, because AR had been before that. It's been around for a very long time. It's not a new piece of technology, but it's struggled to become sort of a consumer technology. It's struggled to be used in ordinary things. It's been mostly in military or in aerospace and other things like that. But Pokemon Go was, this AR game on the phone. And I think for me, I was inspired by the potential of what that technology medium could do, because it was the first technology that felt like could provide utility in the real world in a way that no other medium could do. So it can connect you with the physical world by having you play a game and exploring nature. Like, that's one interest, and I think that's one of those things that Pokemon Go did really well. It was get people outside and get them connected with nature, with the physical world. Just move and be physical. But also technology that could actually have an impact with how you learn about the world. And I think for me, so I built an app, a location-based AR app called Avebury Henge, and this was designed specifically for the heritage side, Avebury, and worked closely with National Trust to bring the application to the museum that's on site, to really compare the experience with AR versus traditional mediums, like having a leaflet or a brochure or whatever. And then what we did was we created an experience where it was like a treasure hunt. So you can go around looking for clues, in the physical environment, and find those clues and then put them together like a puzzle and discover something new and learn about that discovery. And so what we did was we put that against the traditional medium, and we found that pretty much everybody who participated could learn a lot more, using augmented reality versus traditional medium. And they not only learned more, but they actually walked around the environment much more. So they explored more of the environment. They just were curious enough to go and find more clues, but also in doing so, they found out more about the environment. In that scenario, I think it was very clear that like augmented reality could actually be a technology that brings us back to a physical space a bit more, something that smartphones were taking us away from. But yeah, soon after that, I just became obsessive about the tech. So I wanted to solve the most difficult problems with AR from a software standpoint, because I'm not a hardware person, I'm a software person, but I just wanted to see what were the most difficult problems. So I was fortunate enough to be offered a fully funded engineering doctorate, which allowed me to be placed in a company for I think like 3 years. So you're basically doing a PhD while you're actually working in a company and doing an R&D project, and that was really exciting to me. So I took it on, and the thing that I found, starting the project, was that ultimately the biggest barrier to AR software, or the biggest challenge with AR software, is called context awareness. It's in essence the system's ability to understand your environment, understand your, what you're doing, your context, and then use that to adapt the application's behaviors accordingly. So the funny thing was that basically my conclusion in the first year of that project was, I think the solution might be AI, in a sense of like, I don't know what comes first, like this or some kind of AGI, because in order for you to have perfect, context awareness, you need a very sophisticated AI system. Didn't know how to measure that, but it was a big problem to solve. Ultimately, I dropped out of the program, and now going back a bit, just to zoom back a bit. So my current co-founder and I actually built a game while we were at university, and we worked together. We made this game with no budget. It was a small team, and we got nearly 100,000 downloads, and we were featured on a top 10, games on the Play Store. So from our experience, we had worked together, and we kind of got a sense of entrepreneurship early on. But zooming back again, he was also working on research, and he was working on a different company, in a VR AR startup company. So when I dropped out of that program, we basically came back and said, let's look at this problem together, and we started the business. But for much of the time when I was doing the research project from a research standpoint. Ultimately, I was just looking at human machine interface technologies. How do you interpret human intent when they are sort of interacting with the computer? And it was a lot of fascinating stuff, but it all led to the same place, which is wearable devices like AR that would eventually be able to interpret your context, your intent, and then how do you solve that problem? And if you can solve that problem and turn it into a business, then it's going to be an amazing business. So that was the motivation behind Phantom Technology.
And when you guys had decided, you and your co-founder had decided to pursue this, had ChatGPT already made headlines by that point?
Oh no, this was in summer of 2019. Daniel and I, we basically came together and we thought, all right, well, there was no ChatGPT. This was before COVID. The world was very different.
Back then, I remember those days.
Yeah. It's really funny, isn't it? One day you'll be able to say, I lived through a pandemic. Like it's a very unique experience.
I was thinking about it with my son. Like, he's 8, he was 6 when it sort of all kicked off. Just started secondary school. Won't remember hardly anything about it. When it comes up now, he's like, "What was COVID again? What was the lockdown again?" Barely remembers it. When he's an adult, we're gonna have to remind him, and it's just gonna be such an alien thing to discuss and say, "I lived through that with you guys." Yeah. But sorry, continue.
Yeah. So we before COVID, we were thinking, okay, there's got to be a what are we trying to build? I think the conclusion we had very early on was we want to build an engine, a software engine that would be able to compute real world data essentially, and turn real world data and fuse real world data to make sense of context. We grew the team. We were working part-time initially, very, very beginning. We were working part-time into COVID, grew the team. On the other side of COVID, we had actually fundraised. So we did a pre-seed funding round at the beginning of last year. And we brought the technology into a sort of a product at the beginning. It was an engine, it was a software development kit. But a couple of years into it, we realized we kind of want to go straight into the wearables market because that's where the opportunity is largest, but also least saturated. And there was all sorts of problems with that market and with that product segment. And so we kind of got into the habit of, let's just see what problems can we solve. What are all these problems? Let's just solve them one by one. And I would never suggest doing that. It's not a good idea because you end up just trying to solve a little bit of everything. But the problems at the time were, okay, well, smart glasses, there's a category. There's like a large category of smart glasses and headsets. On one end, you've got the high cost, high end, bulky, glasses and headsets like the HoloLens, the Magic Leap, great products, but very expensive as well, right? On the other end of the spectrum, you've got low cost, lightweight, smart glasses, but they're quite useless, to be honest, right? So what we thought was, well, why is it that these bulkier or more sophisticated headsets are so much more capable? What makes them more capable? And the answer is it's not actually hardware. Some of it can be attributed to the hardware, but a lot of it is the software. And we found that the companies like Microsoft, like the Magic Leaps, had invested enormous amounts of money into building their own operating system, to building their own software technology there. And you got to remember, building a smart glasses or AR headset, you have to kind of start from the beginning in some essence. The operating system needs to be spatial. Like a lot of the things that you just take for granted, like the OS, needs to be changed and updated to account for this new kind of computing paradigm. And so what we found was actually a lot of the OEMs that were building the cheaper versions of the glasses just hadn't made that kind of software investment to build that ecosystem. So they built the hardware, but it was missing, and it was just nothing on the hardware. And going back to my point earlier, it was like buying an empty shell and then scratching your head, figuring out how, what can you build for this device? So really, we basically very quickly pivoted into, can we improve the capability of these like lower cost or lighter weight devices and glasses, and to try and improve the capability so much that it surpasses the highest cost or highest version. In essence, Cassie was the antidote to that problem in some ways, right? Cassie was supposedly this idea that can we get AI as an offering that we have all this technology for perception, for 3D mapping, and so on. Bring that to these lower end devices or these lightweight devices and make them very capable, make them very useful. And so that was I think the turning point for the business. And since then we've been really focused on building technology to improve the utility of smart glasses and wearable devices. And we're really focused on just building the AI components and the software that powers those devices. And to it, it's still solving the same problem though. It's context awareness ultimately.
And the engine is still a very important part of your offering, right? In that it provides developers the tools to be able to quite easily create their own tool sets within AR. I've been speaking with an organization recently, who I can't say the name of because we may be working together soon, who have created a sort of low-code solution for AR and VR, which is really, really interesting. Would you say that there's kind of quite a leap from the skill set needed from a development standpoint from traditional coding or game development even into something like AR? Is that barrier quite high?
The short answer is not that high. I think tools are getting much easier to use. But there is a design, I think, barrier. I think this is actually more of the barrier than it is a technical barrier necessarily, because there are some technologies you can, like, let's say you're using Unity to build an app for augmented reality platform. You know, if you're used to using Unity, you'll be fine. But it's a design barrier, and what I mean by that is, you got to remember, right? Every single device up to this point, when you build an application, it's contained in that device environment. What I mean by that is, like, I make an app on a phone. The app experience is on that phone, right? On my screen, on that phone. Whereas with augmented reality, the experience is actually with the physical world as well as the device. So you have to account for the uncertainty of the physical world. Right. And so how do you design, solutions or applications where based on the user's context, you have a different experience? Because every time I launch that app, it's not the same experience every time. If I launch it in a factory, or if I launch it at home, or if I launch the app while I'm walking, while I'm cycling, there needs to be a very different experience. So managing that context switch is something that, from a design perspective, developers, I don't think, are used to. In fact, not that many people out there even know the answer to that question. It's frankly open discussion still.
Yeah, so, and that's interesting. So is the idea that Cassie will actually help with that side of things also? Or is it more just from the end user interface side of things?
Precisely. Yeah, Cassie is, in essence, is the end user interface which manages the switching of context for you. So in the future,
but what I mean is, can it help with the development side of things also?
Well, so there's two sides to it. Yeah. So the one side is that there is the experience side. So like the user, let's imagine you buy smart glasses. The future of smart glasses, we believe, is not like the current version of mobile phones and tablets where you have a launcher and you have app icons and you select which app you want to launch. That just doesn't make sense in an interface for smart glasses. The way we envision the future is that smart glasses have context as a cue for showing you what you need to see when you need to see it, and then you having the ability to just simply query or say, open this or launch that, and then be able to adapt the behavior of that app in real time for you. So the interface, you won't really be seeing like icons as an app drawer. It doesn't really make sense to have that. Cassie is the interface, and Cassie interprets and surfaces information for you. Now, on the other end is where developers can build those solutions and build those applications. But how they deploy it is different, right? They can build an app, like an app that's augmented reality. They can deploy it, and Cassie, as an end solution, can manage the context of how that app is presented and used. And so what we're building, in essence, is an operating system over time. And we are actually calling it Phantom OS, but that's early stages right now.
I did see something about that earlier, yeah.
Yeah, that will be how that technology manages the interface.
That's interesting, because even like, I mean, look, I don't know an enormous amount about this, so my example is probably going to be really basic. But even just say like, let's say choosing a color of a particular, graphic that is displayed, from a developer point of view. Like you said, in context, that might not work in low light conditions. So having a piece of technology within the OS to just make those decisions for the developers, so they don't have to think about coding that in based on just the context that they have from user data, that would be incredibly useful. Just being able to create and not have to worry about those additional things, understanding the way that the context is going to be used. In the same way that now you have a lot for app development, there's a lot of no-code solutions there that will just automatically be able to, change the screen to landscape, for example. You don't need to code a second version of the app in order to do that. It just understands, or changes automatically if someone switches their phone to dark mode or whatever. Like there's a lot of that stuff that's just built in and it's automated. So that's what we need from an augmented reality perspective. That's awesome. Very exciting. So what the OS side of things then? So you're saying that's quite early days, but what's the end goal for that? I mean, aside from the stuff we just talked about, and when do you hope to sort of, what's the roadmap for that looking like?
There's a lot of things I can't share, but what I will say is that.
Go on, give me something.
What I will say is there's what we're trying to do is, again, going back to the point, we want to improve the utility of wearable devices, and we're seeing this new era of AI powered wearable devices that will really change the category of wearables completely. And
I noticed, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but I noticed, by the way, you say wearables as your term. Are you being intentionally broad there, as opposed to just specifically AR glasses, because there are some other devices that would fall into that category that can also adopt this technology?
Precisely, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. You have these quote unquote smart glasses, right, where they don't even have a display. They just listen, like the Ray-Bans, right? The perfect example of that. It's a smart glasses. But it doesn't even have it's not augmented reality in the sense that it doesn't have a visual output, but it does have the perception part. It does see your environment. It does have.
I thought it had an overlay side of things. Does it not?
No, it's just audio output.
Right. Okay.
And it has camera, but that's precisely why we're saying AI wearables, because there's all kinds of categories. I mean, you may have seen what Humane announced. I think it was in April. A company called Humane. They announced a product called the AI Pin. The company was founded by ex-Apple employees. They've worked on the iPhone, and they're quite credible as a team. They've raised, several $100 million, I think, dollars to build this what they call new kind of platform for AI wearables. It's called Humane, and it's essentially a device that you clip on, and it just has a camera facing outwards, and you speak to it, and it has a projector. There's no screen, but it projects to like a palm of your hand. It probably projects to your environment as well. But it's very different. It's a very contrarian approach to the future of mobile computing, and I think we'll see where that goes. But there are categories or like that emerging simply because of what AI allows you to do now, where you can kind of rethink how these devices could even be built. What is the design of these kind of hardware devices? You can really like start from scratch and think from first principles. Like what is even a mobile device? What is it supposed to do for us, right? We're so used to thinking that it must have certain things. You have to really question those assumptions and start from scratch. So when we say AI wearables, we are absolutely right. We're being intentional. Smart glasses is a very big category of that. AR glasses as well. But it spans beyond that. And I think there's even smart watches that could possess some of those capabilities as well.
And even clothes and stuff as well, right? I mean, there's wearables as a whole. It's funny, you just reminded me, my best friend at primary school and secondary school, I remember when mobile phones hit the market when I was in secondary school, and everyone had their shitty flip phones and their Nokias and all that sort of thing, right? And my best mate refused to get one, and it was really surprising because he was, out of all of us, the tech nerd. He was already into programming. He would play CS:GO and World of Warcraft every single day. Like the guy knew how to build PCs and stuff. Back then he was that guy. And his reason for it was, I'm not going to bother investing into a mobile phone until it's an implant in my hand and I can just go like this. Now, of course, he ended up doing it, but like later when it was like, when they got a bit better, but he for a very long time was like, there's no point. It's not good enough for what I want to use it for. And he didn't. He held out until the smartphone, pretty much, I think just before the smartphone. So he was well ahead of all of us, like, because that's coming. And I just saw that thing on, I just Googled what you were talking about, the pin, and that sort of reminded me of that. I don't think that's particularly practical, but there you go.
He knew what he wanted. So
you knew what you wanted, yeah. And now we build stuff like for a living. So there you go. What you mentioned, you were a game dev initially, right? And you guys brought a game to market. What was that game? Is it still available?
No, it's not available unfortunately anymore.
Oh no, that's a
It's
shame.
called Time Breaker, and
Right.
the game was a sort of a runner game with an element which is really, really interesting. We had this element of you could go through different worlds. You have three. We're working on four, but we had initially three different worlds you can go through. So you had like a Western world, a medieval world, a modern like noir type of world. But the key, I think, motivation behind that game was we wanted each world to have its own type of style of graphics. With like the unique aspect of the game was that each world was very different in graphics. So the medieval world was like sprite game, and you'd go to the modern one, which was very nice, sort of 2D graphics, refined, and it was black and red. It was very it's like noir kind of style. The Western world was the typical Western movies you'd see, like the film grain effect, black, almost black and white with a tint of brown. So it's very arts inspired, I think, game. But the mechanic was simple, right? You jump, you shoot, you have power ups. So we brought the game out, and surprisingly, it picked up very quickly, but it didn't initially. Initially, it was like struggling to get out the market. Really, no one was downloading it until we, I don't remember how, but I remember until we targeted the Indian market, and that was a much more growing market for mobile games. And I think the market in India was more open to new experiences at the time, and so it just got adopted really quickly in India, and then because of that, it got favored on the top 10 listed. So that then influenced more Western adoption as well.
Wow. How did you manage to target India in the first place? Or was that intentional? Did it just pick up organically, or were you running ads? Like how did that happen?
I'll be lying to you if I said there was a plan. I just tried everything, and we targeted India through what was it? I think we targeted it through. We ran a couple of cheap Facebook ads. Like we spent maybe £5. So I think in total we spent maybe £20 building that game. Something very, very small. Anyways, it's a long time ago. But yeah, it was a good project.
And have you guys, or you individually or together, built any sort of games at all since then, even for side projects or anything like that, or hobbies?
I don't know about all the other guys, but no, I haven't. My co-founder and I kind of moved into the spatial computing stuff ever since. Yeah, the initial team.
No temptation there, no ideas. Yeah, like maybe hammers fighting each other, for example.
No, not yet. And I think it's games are real amazing things. The thing about games that really inspired me was the fact that they a game essentially has every other medium, every other form of media in it. So you can imagine you need a good sound design, music. It's kind of like narrative or storytelling,
writing, directing.
A game I always felt like was the pinnacle of human art, right? You have and it's interactive. It's the only real form of digital experience that's interactive in that. I mean, games for a very long time were physical, and there's a human element to play, like the concept of play that's very deep, and it's very rooted in our primal instincts, I think, or in our way of experiencing the world. Play, like just the idea of forming, and there's this really beautiful concept in games design which we carry to this day in what we do, which is called the magic circle. And so if you and I want to play a game of chess, the process of us setting up the board, pieces, and getting into it, what's actually happening is we are letting go of the rules of the real world, and we're adopting new rules through that process. And as we enter that magic circle, which is what they call it, you and I have this sort of like non-verbal agreement, this non-spoken agreement, where we both know, like, I can't just flip the table and say I win, right? We have to stick to those rules. And that process is something that even animals can understand. And it's very interesting to me where how does that play into the experience of smart glasses or AR glasses, right? That has a big part to it.
That's hugely interesting, isn't it? But yeah, I've long been fascinated by human beings' affinity for play, and it's been proven to be obviously incredibly useful for education, going back to like the examples you gave about the tool that you created for that historical site that you mentioned, and like other things. But yeah, I mean, even my son and I, we play Fortnite together, and it's something that I knew I wanted to do with him. I didn't want to be like, as someone who enjoys playing games, I understand the fundamental opportunity that lies right at your feet with a child who likes playing games. I think if you're not playing the games that they enjoy playing at the moment that they enjoy them, you're missing out on an enormous opportunity to bond like really valuably with someone through playing games. Whether that, like you said, chess, or now with computer games. Like it's I think the what you get out of it is an enormously valuable thing. So it's an opportunity. I tell parents all the time, like, if you're annoyed with your kid playing games too much, learn how to play the game. Like, solution, like, you know what I mean? To taking it away from them is going to make them resent you. But if you show an interest and you want to play it with them, that will be well appreciated, and you might actually get something out of it too.
Yes.
Like, because it is fun. You learn a lot about your kids. You learn how they think. You can help them. You can teach them. Like, one of the things that I'm constantly teaching my son, is to talk less, because he talks a lot. Don't know where he gets that from. And a lot of kids do. They get excited and they talk a lot. And so, a very important part of playing a game like that, where there's strategy involved, is communication.
Yeah.
And making sure that communication is effective and well thought out, and there's strategy and all that kind of thing. I think there's an enormous amount that we can learn from those sort of interactions.
I think kids are also really good at constructing games too, right? Like, they're very good at you put a few kids in a playground or something, and they come up with these like games or these rules that are arbitrary, and they're really interesting when you observe that. It's like, okay, how do they communicate the rules? Sometimes it's unspoken, but they kind of understand the rules of the game. And that's always been very interesting to me, is how does, like, the psychology of play. Because a lot of the times there are unspoken rules in games that we construct. Like a basic example is race, right? You say, right, I'll race you from here to there, and you kind of understand that you can't push each other over. Like, we just know that inherently that is not the rule. The rule is that you run straight, and you don't interfere with each other. And if you do, pretty much everyone agrees that was cheating, and that was never even spoken. Like, no one defined that as a rule. So that's always been really.
And then you get chastised for that, and then that's how you learn lessons about how to interact with the world and other people. That rules are an important thing. It's interesting because of talking about when we spoke about VR earlier, about how in an industrial setting it can be used to mitigate risk in the real world. That's essentially what a lot of play is. It's about learning about sort of types of interactions, whether they could be confrontation, whether they could be competition, or whatever, and replicating them in like you said, in that circle where it's kind of a safe space to do that and see what happens and learn from it. And that's why young animals, humans included, right, of all kinds, play fight, especially because it's about testing boundaries and understanding what those boundaries are. That's an enormous part of it. That's why violence is often a part of play as well, especially for boys, because of it's their way of being able to test out things and understand what those limits are. But it's it's hugely fascinating because, like you said, it's not just from a physical perspective, but like you said, from a societal rule perspective, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to be dishonest. You should be winning on your own merit, or congratulate the person that is better than you, like, and learn from them. All these rules are learned inherently through play, which is hugely fascinating. Which is why we tell kids to like get off the PlayStation. Like,
exactly.
Like,
I was just about to say,
what else are they gonna do?
I hope AR is like a part of that, encouraging kids to be more social as well. Because
I think so too. As long as the tools are built in to allow that,
yeah,
for sure. Because one thing I thought about many years ago about AR, I got hugely excited about this idea, and I'm putting it out there because I put out all my ideas out there. I want someone to build this, right? It's the idea of a kind of a social network in AR where through the sort of similar technology that something like Pokemon Go used through satellite location and all that, I could walk up to a wall and spray paint it in AR.
Yep.
And someone else can see it 3 years later by switching to a certain setting and seeing what I did. And there'd be a level of communication and community and all this sort of stuff. I'd love to see that side of things where people can switch between these different views of the world and like layers on top of the world, because that creates a type of interaction and interactivity between people that I think is so cool. Like, you could just imagine people leaving each other notes and, things like that. And, or creating artworks together as a community, people adding to things over time to create, pieces of artworks, like all of that sort of stuff. I think that will come.
Yeah.
I hope.
A friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the show and only takes a couple of minutes.
And I really hope that that's at the forefront of people's minds in developing these technologies, the community aspects of it, for sure.
Definitely will. I think the approach that Apple is taking with the Vision Pro is currently like a home entertainment device or home workstation kind of device. But you can imagine very easily that over time that will become lightweight, more and more lightweight, and become portable. And there will be a moment in time where that would be like sort of the iPhone moment, where you could take maybe glasses outside and take the same kind of technologies that you're using with Vision Pro, but outdoors as well, and expand it to a mobile use case. That's coming from a different angle, where what we're doing is on the smart glasses side now, which is more just sort of a assistive technology approach, and then over time it could expand its use cases and adopt more and more entertaining type of experiences and so on. But it's weird because there will be a point where they will converge.
Right, and that's what I was just thinking. I think there will be a point where it's all going to amalgamate to some degree, and you'll in a good way, for sure. Like, one thing about the Apple Pro that really piqued my interest the most, which I think is probably one of the most underrated aspects of the technology, is the cameras looking internally at the eyes. I think that's hugely underrated because of the potential for that in terms of being able to facilitate interactions between people using the devices across the world is hugely important. Because one of I think the most disconcerting things for those sort of interactions for most people is having to use avatars. But if the avatar can feel like that person's actually there and looking at you, like that's hugely important. That blew my mind. Like, this idea, because that's the bit that's covered, right? So even if you had cameras in your room that were recording you, it's like, well, fine, but they're still going to see a version of you with this fucking headset on. So it's like, being able to do that and recreate that part of the face that really blew me away, because I was like, that's going to change things in a big way. You're going to see people having, coffee in the real world with a virtual person, and they're going to, from their perspective, look like they're sitting right opposite each other. Like, that's really exciting to me, and that's where these technologies start to merge for me. That's the kind of stuff that gets me going. What's your thoughts of the new the Meta Quest 3?
Oh, interesting. I think there's a lot of things they're doing right. So the Quest has always been a very long-term investment. I mean, the Oculus really was for Facebook at the time a long-term investment into this technology. When it was acquired, and now it became the Quest series. Quest 3 is in some ways much better than Quest Pro, but it's not a pro device, meaning that there will probably be a pro device that's going to come out later as well. But I honestly think it's a great product for the price, and kudos to Meta for putting all that resource out there and pushing them. I think they've been paying a lot of what we call R&D tax, right? They've been paying a lot of invention tax. They've been paying a lot of service to the invention of these technologies that, you know, takes a lot of time and money to build, and over time it can be cheaper and cheaper. So they're doing a great job of really trying to aggressively bring down the price of these kinds of devices. Really, for competitors, it's really hard to compete with Meta. So many VR startups have just you know, disappeared because they couldn't compete with the price. But you know, Meta Quest 3 is a great device. It's a really good device.
Yeah, the pass through and it looks amazing. Yeah, because that's one of my biggest complaints about the Quest. I've got the Quest 2 there, and that's one of my biggest complaints about it. I really wanted to explore the potential of AR, actually, because that for me is, you know, the escapism aspect of VR is fantastic from a game perspective, but like the potential of AR for me from a productivity perspective, I found really exciting. You know, this idea of being able to transform my office into something different, to create, you know, to be able to bring in different types of, you know, virtual screens and different you know, streams of information and all that kind of stuff. I found very exciting, and then I was kind of disappointed with the experience on Quest 2, but it looks like they've definitely upped their game in the Quest 3 in that regard.
Yeah, the Quest 2 was black and white. Was the password?
Yeah, really janky as well. Like it really, the frame rate is awful, like really bad. So yeah, it's just no good. And just even like a simple thing like being able to see your own keyboard, you know, like just simple things like that. If it's in black and white and my keyboard's black, like I can't see what the keys are. I can't touch type. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's no good for me. So like just simple things like that, even, you know. So yeah, they've made some huge developments there, and even like the AR games that they've created, where you with the spatial mapping, like where you can map out your whole home and then start playing Call of Duty Zombies, like that. That looks
incredible. I've always dreamed of that experience. I want to buy one just for that kind of game.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I haven't bought one yet, but that's a couple of ads I've seen with that. I'm like, take my credit card. and then I know the wife isn't going to be too happy me running around like the house like an idiot, but you know, hey ho.
You know, it's not. My worry is that there's going to be a point in time where I forget what's physical and what's you know, virtual, and I just throw like a physical thing, like the virtual zombie, and I'm like, shit, that was it. I forgot. And you know,
step off an actual cliff because you thought there was some stairs there, like, or something.
You have to be careful, you know, when you play those games. And that's why we need AI, because to tell us, hey, there isn't actually a staircase there, dude. There's exactly that. Like AI is already playing a big role in actually Quest 3 with everything from 3D mapping to, you know, in like tracking and so on, like hand tracking or controller tracking. I think with the controllers, they've actually gone quite extreme with that. I'm not sure if I remember reading something about it's mostly AI powered now, whereas before they had I think it was the LEDs or the illuminators. So there's a lot of AI kind of not replacing, but minimizing the hardware components in some ways and using AI to.
Well, it's like you said about that accuracy thing going down and that predictive thing going up. It's like, you know, just a simple thing like the controllers understanding where the hand positions are, you know, with the older headsets, depending on lighting and all that too, if you put your arms down to your side, it just wouldn't understand where your arms were, where your hands were. So, but now with these sort of AI advancements, it's just able to figure out, well, if they were there a moment ago, then they've gone out of sight. They are probably, you know, probably by the little things like that, it really drastically improve quality of life, don't they?
That's right. Yeah, the prediction of where could it be next if it was here. Exactly. That's literally what prediction offers as a counter to the lack of precision. It's interesting. It's interesting. I think Meta is also with the Ray-Ban stuff is really interesting too. So I think a lot of people are concerned about the privacy stuff with Meta, traditionally speaking, and having a device that you can take outside and have a camera that could be always on it's a little bit concerning for some people.
I remember when I've seen the ads on Facebook, of which I hardly go on anymore, not because of those reasons, but just because it's just fucking boring. But when I do go on there, and I remember seeing the adverts for that Ray-Ban's Meta collaboration a while back, and all the comments were horrendous. There were literally thousands and thousands of comments like, oh great, now a camera to watch everything I'm doing. Like, lots of people, saying Black Mirror, Black Mirror, Black Mirror, like, and it's because of the reputation that unfortunately, Meta or Facebook has. So, which is unfortunate, because I think,
Was this the first one or the second one?
this was the first one I saw them
Right.
do that with. Yeah, so a while back now. I haven't. I don't think I've even been on Facebook since they released.
They've made some improvements, I think, with the brand, and
Right.
Meta is improving its reputation a little.
It is.
Yeah, I think what's doing really well is the open source AI. Like they've put a lot of, there's something that they're doing is they've made a lot of their, things like Llama, which is a large language model, open source, and they're just kind of doing a lot of contribution in the AI space in general, which is quite good to see, as opposed to other companies that are closed source with AI. So I thought Meta going down that path with AI was a very interesting decision, and I can clearly see that they're improving their reputation amongst developers, at least.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. I think that the issue is that for the regular consumer, the main interaction with Meta is going to be through the Meta platform or Facebook, or perhaps a Quest. And to be honest, the Facebook platform, it doesn't offer an enormous amount, I think, these days. In terms of the competitive market that is social media now, it's not offering a huge amount. And then that with that sort of still that bad taste in people's mouth, you can see if, well, what's the point? Let's use something else. And everything's going video led anyway now. So, yeah, I mean, it's useful for, I still sell stuff on Marketplace every now and then. That's my use for it, but that's about it. But yeah. So look, tell me more about what's coming up. So you've just announced this huge partnership, which is really exciting. What else is on the horizon? Without, obviously, I know there's some things you can't talk about, but like, what's the sort of the future looking like? What are the plans you've got in the pipeline that you can tell me about?
Well, this partnership it's really exciting because we get to bring Cassie to, first of all, an existing customer base, which is exciting.
Right.
So there's the customers who already have that device, but sort of a growing list of customers that are getting that kind of DigiLens Argo device. But so we've got a really great partnership with DigiLens to expand our offering with them, and I think this could be a long-term partnership. We'll keep exploring as we go. But I think from our perspective, we have other companies in the pipeline that we can't announce yet, but we will eventually be able to announce early next year, and we've got Cassie coming on those platforms as well. So from our perspective, the exciting thing is just bringing Cassie to wearable devices and improving the capabilities, or adding certain kind of functionalities. Like we right now offer 3 key functionalities, which is spatial search. So it's the ability to say, where is my whatever, where is this thing, where is the entrance, where's the exit, that kind of thing. Then you've got contextual assistant, and contextual assistant is the sort of, you can query about anything. So you could ask, help me cook with these ingredients when you open a fridge, that kind of thing. That's contextual assistance. And then we also have task management, which is your ability to basically say, help me do this, and the system can break down the task into steps. And so you can say, help me change the oil of my engine. I don't know, right? It will say, okay, well, first do this, make sure you do that. And then it'll break it down to you, and it will watch you do the thing, and it will be able to trigger as you're doing it, from one step to another. And it's all done dynamically. But right now, you can also create your own tasks if you want and share them, so that allows customers to be able to capture, certain things, like, let's say, certain programs, like training programs, and be able to share it with another, with an intern or another member of the workforce. So there is these 3 offerings, and over time we'll probably expand those offerings as well. So the exciting thing is taking it to market, because we're just coming out and we haven't got Cassie right now, in market. We're bringing it to the market as we speak. So we've got some trials, but bringing it to the market at large is just so exciting. So
how have those trials gone?
So we've had some trials, but these trials are more like trying to understand what. So we've been working for the last, let's say, a year, probably just over a year, with doing proof of concepts, basically with industrial partners and in manufacturing, a little bit in healthcare as well. We're exploring that and trying to collect ideas really of what is it that Cassie could do, and learn and try and develop the product in a way that actually addresses those problems. So we're not sort of building it for no one, we're actually building it for the people who are going to purchase these devices, these glasses. And we found a lot of diversity in terms of ideas. So we took those lessons and we've created these three, actually the three features I just mentioned around those offerings, around the challenges that we feel like we could address in those environments. So spatial search is just a very scalable one where you can ask where is something, but you could also incorporate spatial search into other things. So you could have, let's say, a program where let's say you've undergone surgery and you need to adhere to your recovery program. And so you could say, the system can help you perform certain things to adhere to that program. So you could say, make sure to take your medication at this time. Don't forget, or give you reminders, or show you where you left it, perhaps. It will help you perform, like change your bandage or whatever it might be, right? It could do those things and help you adhere to the program as well. But yeah, also in manufacturing, those features come in handy for improving operational efficiencies, simply. So yeah, we've been trying to, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it, but trying to capture that and then make sure that the product, when it does come to the market at scale, that we're finding those common pain points and we're addressing those with Cassie.
And just to clarify on something as well, which I realized I didn't ask, which seems like quite an important thing to ask. Cassie overall, does it learn collectively? So from all users' inputs, to then get better at being able to provide for everyone else, or is this very on an individualized basis it's going to learn?
A bit of both,
right?
To be honest, a bit of both. So there are things that are individualized for sure. Yeah. So a company will have, let me give you an example. So a factory will have specialized tools or equipment, and it will learn for that factory, right? Like that's for that customer, for that user. But
so is it kind of on request kind of thing, I suppose?
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Okay.
So you can imagine Cassie with expanded intelligence in different domains. We were talking about earlier, which was that it has general knowledge about everything. It's mediocre at everything. But when the customer sort of when a customer wants to purchase Cassie for their facility, they want Cassie to be specializing in their facility, and so that specializing aspect is the individual part. And the other bit is, over time, of course, we're improving the model, we're improving the recognition technology, so it will improve for everyone, the baseline. But then the unique and the specializing part, which will be unique to each individual customer.
And I suppose that's the dynamic of I mean, that's a necessity because you're B2B, right? This isn't a B2C product. So that's why. If it was B2C, then it would be a very different proposition, I'd imagine.
That's right.
I was just thinking, just random thought, but I'm sure you would have thought of this before. But going back to what I was saying about memory earlier, the application potential for just the spatial awareness and the kind of reminders for things that you use in the medical context seems to me like a huge potential for the application in Alzheimer's patients.
Yes, yeah, we're actually exploring that. Yeah, it's amazing, for sure. Yeah,
I mean, hugely, like the amount of just the amount of assistance that could provide to people who can't afford, say, a permanent live-in sort of medical professional, or don't always have family around, to just have someone there to guide them through and make sure that they're not forgetting things, keep them out of danger as well. You've left the oven on, like that kind of stuff. Like, that could be a huge quality of life improvement for people around the world.
Yeah, no, this is the exciting part about just bringing AI to wearables is you can start providing these kinds of solutions like episodic memory or events that may or may not have happened and surfacing that to the user. And I think Cassie will have so many different sort of abilities over time. And we're exploring different verticals. Well, you never know, some verticals might be so much more interesting and Cassie might be more useful in one vertical or versus another. The key is that most devices have a lot of hardware progress to still make. So we're still sort of pushing and waiting and also pushing for device manufacturers to improve components or improve the kind of things like depth sensing. Adding that as a physical component can dramatically improve accuracy of 3D mapping, but also
we need the quantum computer. That's what we need.
Well, yeah, that'll solve a lot of problems. But yeah.
But yeah, and that's the and then of course there's a whole resource problem there as well when it comes to a lot of the hardware side of things, which is a whole other challenge. One that we can't get into because we're almost out of time, which is crazy. I don't know where that time has gone. But look, before we call it, and I let you carry on with what I'm sure is a very busy day. Just really quickly, I wanted to ask you to maybe summarize a bit of your journey, but also maybe give out some tips specifically as it relates to your fundraising side of things. Because I think, what I typically like to do at the end of each episode is sort of try and provide any sort of additional value that we might have missed to listeners out there. And fundraising is a tough slog for founders, right? Is there anything that you took out from that journey and you learned along the way? Things that were surprising, anything at all that you could share that could be insightful, do you think, to listeners or watchers? For
fundraising specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways to go about it. I think that the only thing we've learned, and Dan's been doing a lot of the fundraising for us in the recent round as well, and we've learned that actually you don't need to stick to the norm, and I think that might be helpful to know. Like, so a lot of businesses will kind of, I would imagine, a lot of founders have this understanding that you have to do your pre-seed, you have to then do your seed, you have to do your seed, and it's very like textbook, right? There's sort of a template, but in reality, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're selling a bit of your business for investment, and you need to think about it as a business, as an ownership of a business, and like what value do you provide to your shareholders? What is it that they're getting? And it's important to really figure that part out, because you can't expect them to just come in blindly and invest in you. You have to sort of really be saying, look, here's the big risk, but also here's the potential big reward. And you got to get the right people, the right appetite for your level of risk for your business. And that's if you aren't figuring that part out, I think you're missing the beat with potential investors, because some investors just want safer bets and some want very risky bets. And if you're not aware of where you stand in that sort of spectrum, that you're not targeting the right investors potentially.
And that's the important thing as well, is actually to target the right investors in the first place. Whereas a lot of founders tend to just sort of spray and pray. Any investor, anyone that has that label of investor, well, they're worth speaking to, which isn't the case. I mean, the same way that going to market, you wouldn't just try and sell to anyone with anything. You're going to find the ideal customer profile, right? That's the same sort of thing. I spoke about this recently in a workshop. Find the ideal investor profile, not the, it's the same sort of thing, I suppose. Good advice. Well, listen, man, I'll let you go. But I appreciate that last little nugget of knowledge there. And I think people listening and watching will.
I want to emphasize, like, I don't think there's an answer for anyone. That, like, there's no one answer that fits all. So
yeah.
By the way, I think we have a lot to learn. So this is we're early in our journey. So there's if you ask me the same question 3 years from now, I might have a very different answer. But
yeah, I mean, that's a very self-aware thing to add, and I think that's it speaks a lot about you as a founder to have said that, like that. But at the same time, the reason why I think it's good for people to hear what you said and for me to ask the question is because if you are still further along than a lot of people are, you know.
Yeah.
But equally, a lot of people are further along than you also. So, people are going to naturally look up to you as something to attain, to aspire to. And so I think that's why it's interesting for you to share what it is that you have learned. But I appreciate you saying you've still got more to learn. We all do, right?
Yes, yeah. And it's a painful process. Be ready for the pain. It's just
Absolutely.
not easy.
Absolutely. But look, hopefully having this conversation today brought you out of that pain for a bit and bringing you into my circle of play, and we were able to play with ideas and thoughts for a little bit, to forget the pain of the outside world for a bit. And hopefully the same experience has been for the listeners and the watchers. And listen, man, I just really appreciate you taking the time and being generous with your time and telling your story. And it's hugely exciting. This is, you're doing everything right up my alley. So I'm going to be following this very, very closely. So let's keep in touch. And I'd love to get you in for round 2 sometime in the near future, perhaps in the new year. We can hear about those updates that you were being very secretive about.
Yes, let's do it. It's been really fun. I loved it. So yeah, it was great. It was a great experience, and definitely can't wait to do round 2.
Appreciate it, man. All right, well, look, have a great day, great week, great year, all of that shit. And it's been great. And I again, thank you so much. Have a great time. We'll speak soon.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe and join in the conversation in the comments below.